Why communal GO? Address of Thandai Periyar at a public meeting on 13th August 1950 organized by all parties. Dear President, respectable ladies and my dear comrades, you are all aware of the clandestine conjectures and efforts taken by a section of the people to scrap the communal GO. I issued an appeal to observe Hartal, an agitation by closure of all shops tomorrow completely. I appealed to the students to abstain from attending the schools and colleges. I appealed to the merchants and businessmen to keep their shops closed tomorrow. I appealed to all the people in our state to participate in the procession in large numbers to demonstrate the public opinion in support of the communal GO. Some people have come forward to criticize me for giving such an appeal. They mistake me. They allege that I intend forming up some sort of serious trouble to them by some agitation. Even some ministers have talked like that. Congressmen attribute some political motives. They write as they like. Let them do anything as they please. I am not at all bothered. I wish to tell you that you should not do anything just because I appeal or just because they say something. Don't blindly submit to what all I say or take everything they say straight away. You please think over and find out the truth yourselves. You are rational beings. You please think over the pros and cons, good and bad, right and wrong, and then come to your own judgment. If you find there is reason, justice, and truth in what I say, then do as your conscience dictates. The communal representation of the Dravidian race is not a talk of very recent origin. It has been the raging issue even in 1960. Even in those days, our leaders, our elders and wise people demanded communal representation. Ensuring justice for all communities should be implemented in the field of education and in the matter of giving jobs. It was to be based on the population and the respective strength of the various communities. One thing you will have to notice is that those who raised such a demand were for some time in the Congress party. In other words, they were in the Congress till they realized the importance of communal representation. When they found that there can be no communal justice meted out to all communities through the Indian National Congress, they came out of it. The fact that the Congress party stood for the welfare and progress of one particular community of Brahmins came to limelight. Having failed in their attempts to set the Congress House in order, they revealed the truth that the Congress party was eternally against the interest of backward and scheduled caste communities of Dravidian race. They came forward to campaign the cause of the backward and the scheduled caste who were all along been groping in the darkness for peace, progress and prosperity. They raised the voice for communal justice. People began to assert for their rights strongly. This is what took place here in South India. In the North India, the same demand was raised in 1900 itself. They asserted for communal representation in all walks of life based on population. It is the Muslims who first demanded the introduction of communal representation. They were the pioneers to agitate for the same. It may be that many of us are not aware of this part of the history even now, but at least some of our elders could certainly recollect what actually took place. Some of us know the matter clearly. The Congress opposed the Muslims for demanding the communal representation policy to be implemented. The Congress party failed. Then British government of India brought in a new scheme granting separate electorates for Muslims. The British accepted the policy of communal representation even as early as 1900. They came forward to render justice for all communities. They felt rightly that the communal representation policy is the only boon to help all the communities. At the time, the capital of India was at Calcutta. Majority of the residents of Calcutta were Muslims. So it was very easy for the Muslim to gain success. Somehow the Muslims succeeded in getting separate electorates. The Britisher gave the green signal by supporting the communal representation policy for all communities in all walks of life. Subsequently, the Congress started what is called the Swadeshi movement. The inner motive of this movement was to create a strong opposition to granting of the separate electorates to the Muslims. It was a move against the splitting of Bengal. The gullible people were misled to believe what the Congress said. They had very high hopes of Swadeshi movement. They expected miracles to happen, not being aware of the real motive behind the movement. They did not realize that it was not a right to deny the Muslims of their legitimate share. What led to this sort of ignorance? Even now, many of our people are ignorant of the fundamental principles of politics. Common man in this country believes what the leaders and others say. They are not sufficiently educated to know things. It was much worse then. They straightaway believed that the Swadeshi movement was a patriotic movement. But the Muslims were strong and united. They faced the strong opposition of the Congress resolutely and succeeded in securing their rights. Even in the year 1910, separate constituencies were allotted to Muslims and Hindus. Further problems arose when they were purificated. It was a very difficult thing to evolve the constituency on this basis. Finally, constituencies were divided as Muslim constituency first and the rest were called as non-Muslim constituencies. The Congress, which was against the Muslims, met with failure. Yet it was not prepared to accept the defeat. There was no other go for the Congress than to yield. At last, the Congress accepted on the condition that the British should give up the idea of splitting Bengal. This is what the agreement. Somehow the Muslims succeeded in getting separate electorates in 1910. Even after this, the Congress continued to pursue its anti-Muslim policy. This resulted in strengthening the hands of the Muslims. The Muslim League grew up speedily as a powerful political body opposed to the Congress. The League was able to withstand the onslaught of the Congress. All efforts taken by the Congress against the League ended in a dismissal failure. It has only led to the strengthening of League. Ultimately, the Congress entered into a pact with the League at Lucknow in 1916, and that is the famous Lucknow Pact in the history of Congress. That pact has been responsible to enable the League demand a separate sovereign state, which is now called as Pakistan. It is after all these developments in the north that the Dravidian leaders here thought aloud and realized the need to demand separate representation for us. Muslims who were a majority there were able to get a considerable share in all fields on account of their solidarity. Their determination and struggle fetched them their rights easily. When such being the state of affairs in the north, here in South India, those who are 90% of the total population have somehow fortified their rights in all walks of life, and almost all the posts were monopolized by a particular community called Brahmins, which was after all only 3% of the population. The majority Dravidians was dominated by the minority Aryans here. Their fate is very pitiable. They are very backward in all walks of life. Sir P. Tyagaraya was a very powerful congressman, and he was the secretary of the Congress session held at Madras. Till 1916, Sir P. Tyagaraya and Dr. T. M. Nair, a versatile scholar and public worker, were not in terms. They were opposed to each other. They realized that by their mutual quarrels and enmity, Brahmins were gaining against the interest of the non-Brahmins. They both realized that Brahmins were forming up bitterness among them to exploit that situation in favor of the Brahmins. They both resolved to forget the bitter past and united together and laid the foundation for the non-Brahmin movement. Since they had no courage to call themselves as Dravidians, they named the movement as the South Indian Liberal Federation, which was popularly known later as the Justice Party. As the principles of the SILF were very reasonable and just, the movement gained the popular support of the non-Brahmins. They participated in the first election held in 1920 and scored a resounding victory. I was in the Congress party at that time. The Brahmins in the Congress party were terribly jealous of the growing popularity of the Justice Party. They had to counteract the growing influence of the non-Brahmins in the political sphere. They sought the advice of Mr. Gandhi. At that time, Miss Annie Besant was very popular in Indian politics. The reasons for her popularity was that she was a foreigner and her services were mainly to the advancement of the Brahmin community. Yet the Iyengar Brahmins hated her because it was the Iyer community that was much benefited by her services. She ignored the Iyengar Brahmins and encouraged the Iyers. Sadasiva Iyer, Mani Iyer, Sir C.P. Ramaswamy enjoyed the favor of Miss Annie Besant. This was hated by the Iyengars. They feared that the Saivit Brahmins would supersede them. They were afraid that the Saivit Brahmins would one day monopolize all fields, leaving the Vaishnavite in the backwater. They resolved to seek a new leader who would work for their welfare. They chose Mr. C. Rajagopalachari, who was considered a clever person. They went to Mr. Gandhi for his advice and consent. It is in this way that Rajagopalachari, Rajaji, became the leader of Brahmins. For what Gandhi has done to Rajaji, he made Mr. Gandhi a very big leader in South India. It is at that time I joined the Congress party under the persuasion of Rajaji. The constructive program of the Congress was very much appealing to me. It attracted a very large number of people eminent towards the Congress party. Many became the followers of Gandhi. What are the things Gandhi preached to us? First, Hindu-Muslim unity. Second, the eradication of untouchability. Third, the Khadar cloth scheme for the uplift of the poor. Fourth, the prohibition. Apart from these, Gandhi stated clearly that Congress party would not seek any post by contesting the elections. I sincerely believed that the Congress is primarily a social reform movement. I worked for the Congress very sincerely. Naturally, the Congress became very popular. When the Justice Party owned the elections and formed the cabinet, the Congress carried on intensive anti-propaganda. The Congress did not reckon the good works of the Justice Party as great. They stooped to follow very cheap politics. They had lowered their political level. They attacked the Justice Party unnecessarily. They made a big fuss about the salary of the ministers. They heckled them for traveling in the first class by train. They talked of their eyeglasses, caps, etc. By these, they wanted to win the hearts of the poor people. They posed as if they were the only champions of the poor. By these methods, they managed to dupe the public, and in 1926 elections, the Justice Party faced a defeat in the elections. The Congress managed to form an alternative government with the independents led by Dr. Subbarayan. Ranganatha Mudaliar and Arogyasamy Mudaliar were his colleagues in the cabinet. But it could not remain in power for long. Except Dr. Subbarayan, all the other ministers submitted resignations. Later, Mr. S. Muttaiah Mudaliar and Sethuratna Iyer became members of the cabinet. The Justice Party supported this ministry. This cabinet did a lot of good things to the people. What all the Justice Party was hesitant to do during its period, this cabinet boldly implemented. Of all the good things done by this cabinet was the implementation of the communal GO, which is most important and praiseworthy. Without caring for the position in many quarters, Mr. Muttaiah Mudaliar boldly passed the order ensuring communal justice to all the communities belonging to Dravidian race. For this good act of meeting justice to all communities, the Brahmins took cudgels against Mr. Muttaya Mudaliyar. They described him as a Rakshasa. They defeated him twice in the subsequent elections. But Mr. Mudaliyar was not at all perturbed. He knew the consequences and boldly acted to lift the suppressed section Dravidians of the society. He took the defeats as the reward for his good acts. Being the pioneer of the communal jivo, he has throughout his life dedicated himself to safeguard the same from dangers. He took all the attempts to resist the efforts made to invalidate the jivo either by legal methods or otherwise. He stood firm to save the jivo whenever there was danger by the enemies. That is why you find him now very much worried. You find some people criticize him for this. If he has no right to fight for the jivo, I ask, who else has the responsibility? Let the critics understand this much. I was in the Congress when the communal jivo was first sought to be introduced in 1921 by the Justice Party. Even though I was in the Congress then, I had a very unshakable faith in the communal representation of the Dravidian race, and I had a specific understanding with the leaders that the Congress would implement the same. In those days, Thiruvika, Kalyanasundram and Dr. Varadarajalu Naidu, despite being Dravidians, were opposed to the communal representation inside the Congress. But I was very strong and stubborn. For my sake, Mr. Rajagopalachari also supported me. His view was that some seats at least should be reserved to the non-Brahmins. He did not totally agree with the communal jivo so far as I am concerned. I did not attach much importance to the same. If anything serves the purpose, it was enough for me. Rajaji. That is why I agreed to the proposal of Rajaji. Even before this understanding with Rajaji, we started in 1917 the Madras Presidency Association to counteract the activities of the Justice Party and non-Brahmin movement. We began to work against the Justice Party. Mr. Kesava Pillai was the president of the association. Myself and Mr. Govinda Das were the vice presidents. Dr. Varadarajalu Naidu and Thiruvika were the secretaries. It was clearly accepted that 50% should be reserved for the non-Brahmins. But this was not accepted to Mrs. Kasturi Ranga Iyengar, S. Satyamurthy Iyer, Srinivasa Iyengar, and other leaders of the Brahmin caste in the Congress. They accused Mr. Rajaji for having extended his support to me. They thought Rajaji was afraid of my influence. They even went to the extent of overthrowing Rajaji. They formed another national organization with Vijayaraghavacharya as president. Myself, Rajaji and T. Prahasam were elected as secretaries. Mrs. Kasturi Ranga Iyengar and V.O. Chidambaram were elected as vice presidents. Even in this, it was clearly understood that everyone should talk of nationalism after getting the due share for all the communities in national matters. The quota for the non-Brahmins was tentatively fixed at 50%. This national association gained the mass support because we announced 50% to the non-Brahmins. But Mr. Rangaswamy Iyengar and Mr. S. Satyamurthy became very jealous. They secretly planned and announced the working program of the Congress, and their plans were accepted by the working committee. I think it is clear to you that the Congress too accepted the principle of proportionate representation to ensure justice to all the communities based on the population. In the year 1924, the Tamil Nadu Congress session took place at Thiruvannamalai. I presided over the conference. In that conference, Rangasamy Iyengar and Srinivasa Iyengar induced their followers to attack Sarpit Ragaraya Chettiar and other Justice Party leaders vehemently. They used very abusive language. I was very much provoked at their indecent behavior. Myself and Mr. S. Ramanathan decided to pay them in their own coin. Being the president, I permitted Mr. Ranganathan to speak. He condemned the Brahmins as communalists. Next, Mr. Shafal Mohammed came forward to speak. He attacked Ramanathan without rhyme or reason. Next, Mrs. Annamalai Pillai and Venkatakrishna Pillai came forward and replied to the speech made by Shafal Mohammed. I mentioned this to enlighten you that I remained in the Congress even though I had difference of opinion with the Brahmin leaders. Another session of the Congress party was held at Kanchipuram in 1925. Mr. Tiruvika presided over the same. A day before the conference, I convened the meeting of the non-Brahmins at Kanchipuram itself. Mrs. Muttaya Mudalayar, Sir R.K. Shanmugam Chetty, Vellingiri Goundar, Ramalinga Chettiar and other non-Brahmin leaders attended the same. We resolved to table a resolution in the Congress session demanding communal representation to be accepted. I myself took the resolution to the working committee. The Brahmins objected, stating that such a resolution should not be permitted in the Congress. I then argued, in our propaganda, we have criticized the Justice Party and proclaimed that Congress is the only true representative of the non-Brahmins. I remind you that Congress had already accepted the principle of communal representation. It has already fixed 50% as the reservation quota for the non-Brahmins. As such, it is unfair to disallow the resolution. They did not reply to any of the arguments. They simply disallowed the resolution. I once again rose up and argued that as the Congress has now decided to enter the Legislative Assembly, there is the necessity to take up the resolution as relevant. It is known to all that Swarajist Party is the offshoot of the Congress. When it contested the elections, Congress is bound to extend its supports. As such, the question of reserving 50% to the non-Brahmins is absolutely necessary. It is our moral obligation to assure all the non-Brahmins in view of the elections. After all this, the President said the resolution could be taken up in the open session the next day. I agreed. That night, the Brahmin leaders met privately. They hatched a plan. Thinking that I would not have the support of delegates, they asked me to submit the signature of at least 30 delegates of the conference. I accepted their terms and I procured the support of 50 delegates. After all this, the resolution was bluntly disallowed, stating that it was against the very fundamental principles of the Congress. I was shocked to hear the verdict. I rose up and said, "You wanted the support of 30 delegates. I got the support of 50 delegates. I was assured yesterday that the resolution could be taken up for consideration today. In spite of all these, the resolution is simply disallowed. Is there any justification? I want a clear verdict from the President." Immediately, the Brahmins started shouting, "The President of the conference has delivered his ruling and passed on to the next item in the agenda, so nothing can be done now. You sit down, sit down." This is what the Brahmins were able to do. I observed their behavior and retorted, saying, "This is a matter between me and the President. It is for him to say whether I could press or not. If he says that I should not speak, I will obey him. You please keep quiet." The Brahmins again started to shout, "Sit down, sit down." Facing them, I said, "There is no use your shouting like this. We can also shout. If we do so, your cries will not be louder. All of you may have to get away." Utter pandemonium prevailed in the conference. Then I realized that there was no use of my remaining in the Congress anymore. I walked out of the conference. Many more followed me. It was for the sake of communal representation for the Dravidian race that I left the Congress in 1925. After that, my friend Rajaji and Tiruvika came to 4 or 5 times and asked me to join the Congress once again. It was all because there were others still in the Congress who wanted the communal representation. Only about 30 to 40 delegates left the Congress with me at Kanchipuram. Those who remained in the Congress with my view had no courage to take a bold decision. The self-respect movement was started by me soon after leaving the Congress. I stood for political reform along with social reform. I was for the eradication of all the social evils first. When Muttaiah Mudaliyar became a cabinet minister, he boldly brought in the communal GO. I was the first person who felt very happy. I took it as my victory. If only I had continued to be in the Congress, I would have gained many big positions. Why did I leave the Congress? Was it for any post or power? No. I did not even think that I would become a leader campaigning the communal GO. This is why we are all much worried about the communal GO now. We want to save it for the danger. We can't afford to lose it. That is why we are determined to fight for it. Please do not think that we are now agitating just because the High Court has held the communal GO as invalid. Even if the Supreme Court gives a judgment tomorrow setting aside the orders of the High Court, we have got to agitate for the implementation of the GO fully in the fields. Why do I say so? Even this GO doesn't ensure proportionate representation to all the communities based on the population. By the present GO, the Brahmins, who are 3% of the population, get 14% reservation. The Christians, who are the 3%, get 7%. The non-Brahmins, who are 80%, get only 72%. You please study these figures. Could it be said that proportional representation is fully ensured to all communities of Dravidian race? Why should the Brahmins, who are only 3% of the population, get 14% by this GO? Why should the non-Brahmins, who are 80%, get only 72%? Why should they lose? Is it not right on our part to agitate? Another factor we have got to seriously consider is the Brahmin dominance in the government services. They are already monopolizing the services. In some departments, their representation exceeds 60% to 70%. As senior officers, they enjoy 90% of the posts. You would have read the details of the facts and figures published in the Tamil daily newspaper Viduthalai during the past few days. In spite of all this, we find the government order declared unlawful in Madras High Court. Even if it were declared lawful, do you think that it is really a just GO? So it is clear that the ideal of rendering justice to all communities is yet to be reached. We have been demanding this for the past many years. That is why I say that the ideal of rendering justice to all communities is yet to be reached. We have been demanding this for the past many years. That is why I say that even if the Supreme Court passes an order against the judgment of Madras High Court and declares the communal GO as perfectly valid, we will have no other go but to fight for the fulfillment of our long-standing demand for proportional representation in proportion to population. Any day we have got to agitate and secure our legitimate share. We can't be docile. We should speak equal justice for all communities based strictly on the population. Another important fact we have got to realize is that this GO is now implemented only at the state level. This GO is not binding on the central government. Many malpractices are seen in the recruitment of personnel to the services. The Brahmins are hunting for jobs for the state to the center. At present, the center is not heeding to the wholesome principle underlying the communal GO. That is why you find Brahmin domination in almost all central government services. Even big posts are held by them. They enjoy 70-80% of the posts in the states already. They are monopolizing almost all the posts in the center. They easily get the jobs as if the government is their own. They create vacancies easily. Sometimes one Brahmin is sent on leave and another Brahmin is appointed temporarily. By the time the leave expires, another is sent on leave. Simultaneously, steps are taken to provide a post permanently. By that time, he will be drawing rupees 500 a month. This is one of the ways Brahmins are helping their own community to get job. See, what is the position in the railways department? Everything is in their hands. At least in the foreign rule, we were able to get some jobs. Today, the railways are monopolized by Iyengar Brahmins. They have shifted the recruiting office for Madras to Bombay. Almost all the members of the election board are Brahmins. When the matters are like this, how is it possible for our people to get jobs? If at all we are in the majority, it is only in class 4 services as peons. Nowadays, even for the peon post, they are also competing. It is said that out of 65,000 peons, 1,300 are Brahmins. Under these circumstances, is there any justification for the Brahmins to go to court? They say that they are denied admission in the education institutions. Let us see what the position is. They are undoubtedly enjoying more than their legitimate share. When we pursue the figures given by the government, we are shocked. They are snatching away 90% of the places in the colleges. They are today going to the court stating that they are discriminated. They are not worried at the great injustice meted out to all other communities. They even went to the Congress leader Mr. Gandhi thinking that he would support them. But Gandhi replied, "Most of you are already educated in large numbers. It will be appreciable if you could devote for service to God for some time. Let the non-Brahmins who have not been educated so far read." This is what Gandhi said. The Brahmins were disappointed. After some time, Gandhi was shot dead. I am telling this to make you realize that justice is on our side. The wise world will ever support our cause. Imagine what will be our future if we are not worried about the communal GO now. What will be the fate of our next generation? Now only we are considered as human beings fit to learn. It is the Justice Party that opened our eyes. It is only after the GO that our communities have started to enter the schools and colleges in large numbers. Some of us were able to get some jobs. What was the position before the advent of the Justice Party and the communal GO? District judges, tahsildars, munsifs, sub-inspectors were all Brahmins. Before the Justice Party came to power, the non-Brahmins were 100% uneducated. After 15 years of the Justice Party rule and even after independence and the Congress Party rule, our literacy rate is below 10%. If our Dravidian people are uneducated, it is not their fault. Can it be proved that we are unfit for education? The real fact is that we were not given sufficient facilities and encouragement. That is all. Most of the Shudra of Dravidian race are working classes. They were paid the wages needed for their daily life. They are able to get higher wages only when the prices of commodities went high. Under these circumstances, how can we expect the son of a cartman, sweeper, cobbler, laborer, and others to read? Compare the conditions of the Brahmins. Even a water supplying Brahmin's son is able to read in the BA graduate class. He can become a judge. For the Brahmins, it is their highest caste that remains an asset. The sacred thread they wear is enough for them. We can see even poor Brahmins reading. Amongst the Dravidians, only the sons of rich men like zamindars and landlords are able to read. Even if we study with all these difficulties, we have no future. We are denied jobs and seats in colleges. The principle of merit and efficiency works against us. Even though our boys pass the examination and are declared eligible for higher studies, they are not able to get admission. We want our boys to read. Is it a crime? There are many malpractices in the selection. This year, 1950, 68,000 appeared for the SSLC examination. 38,000 students failed. Can it be said that the failed candidates are unintelligent? How much money would have been spent for studying up to SSLC? Under these circumstances, is it fair to turn out so many out of education? I would only say that the teachers who trained them were not able to observe honesty. It may be that our examination system is also bad. After crossing one hurdle after another, if our boys pass the examinations and seek admission in the colleges for higher studies, they are denied admission stating that they lack merit. Is this justice? When asked why we are not given jobs, they say that we do not have sufficient qualification. If we want to read and get qualified, we are denied scope, under the pretext that we do not score meritable marks. Today, marks are taken as the scale for measuring the talents. Can it be said that those who score high marks are the only intelligent? After all, more marks are obtained by merely memorizing. We know how marks are obtained. Soon after the examination is over, people go with money to places where the answer papers are corrected. Are not our ministers aware of this? Why some of them might have passed this way? People are aware that marks could be purchased for money. It is not open secret, Brahmin boys are helped in many ways. Brahmin teachers help them. Our boys know only to go to the Vinayaka temple after the exam. The Brahmin boys do not go. They go to their teachers, examiners who are mostly of their own community. Under these circumstances, is it right to determine the talents basing the marks obtained? In Russia, students are given education for a certain period. They are tested. After training, they are given jobs. Doing a job well is the test there. It is only here examinations are made difficult. It is not so in other countries. Students are put to severe hardship here in the name of examinations. Comrades, I say that every community should be allotted a definite percentage of seats based on the population. If any community enjoys even 1% more than their due share, the government should take steps against the person employed and the person who employed him. It is a clear case of encroaching on the rights of others. So there is nothing wrong in the law taking action. Otherwise, the forward sections would still further progress and the backward would become more backward. The dawn of independence to India has given more scope for the Brahmins only. They are progressing speedily. In those old days, Indian civil service examination was held in London. As the government met the expenses, the Brahmins were able to pass the exams. They cunningly included the Christians and the Muslims as non-Brahmins, who were not opposed to the Brahmins. They obeyed the Brahmins in public life. They dedicatedly kept the non-Brahmin out of the ring. Even after independence, the IPS and IAS posts are monopolized by Brahmins. What will be the fate of our people working under Brahmin officers? They will foist false allegations and victimizing our people. How long can our people bear this and remain in service? The Brahmins monopolizing these posts is detrimental to the non-Brahmins who form the majority of the population. Is this democracy? Is this the standard of our administration? If 87% of the population is kept under the sad plight, is this democracy? Is it just, reasonable and fair to allow the 3% of the population to monopolize and dominate? Is it wrong to assert for our rights? We the Dravidians demand justice. We demand respect. We demand our share. When we claim all this, why should anyone get angry? I learned that while addressing a meeting, Mr. Kamaraj assured the people that his government would look after the communal GO. He says that his government will appeal to the Supreme Court against the orders of the Madras High Court. He did not stop with that. He accused me of having an axe to grind in this matter. I do not know what he means. During the last 30 years of my public life, I have played a selfless role. I never expected anything as reward for my services to the Shudras and the untouchables. Can Mr. Kamaraj cite a single instance of my doing anything for myself? My work is the emancipation of the society. I am for the eradication of the high and the low. I want to restore dignity and respect for all men. I want equal justice and equal treatment and equal opportunities for all. Redemption of self-respect and restoration of dignity to mankind are the dedicated tasks of mine. If I had not pursued this policy all these days, will Kamaraj be the president of the Tamil Nadu Congress? Would it be possible for 11 non-Brahmins to be ministers in a cabinet of 12 ministers? It is for them to think over where these gentlemen were. When we started the non-Brahmin movement, so far as I am concerned, in addition to hold the positions of president, chairman, secretary of various bodies, I was also doing big business. I was not a non-entity at any time. It is our non-Brahmin movement that has made them hold a high status today. Today, the non-Brahmin leaders are advising the students not to pay heed to my words. Let them discard me and go to wash the feet of Brahmins. What do I lose? After all, I am aged and with one foot in the grave. What for do our Dravidian boys read? Should they not go to colleges from school? Should they not get good jobs? Is it not the responsibility of the elders to settle these matters all right? This year I gave a letter to Dr. Subramaniam. I recommended a student who got a first class. He did not get admission. In the past I used to give many letters like this, all used to secure seats. Today no one is elected. It is very distressing to see our boys with creditable marks not being able to get selected to prosecute their studies further. Are we to study simply to waste money and remain as slaves? How many crores are spent for education? It is astonishing to see our boys not reaping the benefits. That is why I want a solution to all these. Our next program of action is a difficult one. We will have to sacrifice a lot. It is not for violence. We are not to beat anyone. We are not for throwing acid on anybody. Without giving any trouble to anyone, we will have to bear the difficulties and pain to achieve success. By that agitation, we will gain a lot. Why should we have a government at Delhi which doesn't do anything for us? Can we not rule ourselves? Does our country lack in natural resources? We have a coastline of 1,500 miles. Our ships can go to any part of the world. We have railways. Can we not flourish? Why should we give away our rights and powers to Delhi? When they are there as ministers, we are naturally exploited. What if we had a government of our own? They do not give due respect even to our Tamil Nadu ministers here. Dr. A.L. Mudaliar gave a clean breast of the affairs in the debates of the Legislative Council. Even our ministers have accepted the fact many times. In India, the North is ignoring the South. South is being exploited. Why should we suppressed? If we had powers in our hands, we would have solved our problems. To solve the food shortage, we could have directly imported food grains from abroad. Today we, the Tamil Nadu people, do not have the powers. The government of India procure food grains and take them here and there, and by the time we get our quota, they are almost unfit for consumption. North Indians are suffering here. They are playing. Why should this situation be allowed? Should we not sacrifice even our life and gain full freedom? Let us redeem our land of Dravida Nadu. The present agitation is not an agitation for merely communal jivo. It will lead us to agitate for the separation of Dravida Nadu. Rajaji's imposition of Hindi made the Tamils unite and solidly demonstrate the solidarity of Tamils. Similarly, by the present agitation, we will consolidate our strength against the domination and exploiting Aryans. With zeal and vigor, we will get our motherland. We will rule ourselves. we will soon be free to solve our problems. So I appeal to you all to get ready for playing your role in the agitation.